that little one right there.
Yeah, right. I knew it would be an easier question.
So when I originally came up with the idea, I was, during the pandemic, had been separated from my family. I went with maybe almost a year without seeing my family. I'm originally from New York State. And because of COVID and the lack of the vaccine, I wasn't able to see my family for a really long time. So I was really having that grief of the loss of not having my family around me, but also like our ancestors that we carry with us, those that pass away. So all those people that we were kind of, helping us get through and helping us get to where we were in life.
Yeah, kind of on a similar note, as far as like, when it comes to family and ancestry, I'm really heavy into my ancestry, as well as, the Orishas, but so that is a part of it, but also coming from where I'm from, how I grew up, you see a lot of people come and go. You can take that how you want to, but so a lot of that doesn't leave you, even as you get older, as you mature. A lot of that sticks with you and becomes a part of who you are and how you interact, how you navigate, etc. So that's a lot of like the who in my particular instance.
The timeline's really blurry, but I had, I guess, in the last 2 years, a couple people pass away. One, like a best friend, really suddenly, and then my grandfather before that. So that was definitely all on my mind when we were talking about the theme for this film production, and then also kind of the younger generation, as in how we carry them in terms of how we, support them and build for the future and how we want it to look, how we want to, help them have a different upbringing than maybe we had, and so how we carry the next generation into their adulthood and futures.
Sure.
You came in, yeah.
I kind of came in late, and I always thought that the who we carry stood for just the folks who are passing away. It's funny because I've been working on billboards to bring some some consciousness to all the gun violence, specifically black on black gun violence. That's something I've been kind of conscious of since the 80s, and it's incredible that it's still here. But just the lives that pass away that we don't see or we don't acknowledge, I thought this film was a great way to acknowledge the lives that pass, and that they mean something.
Pass this one back and forth. And I think Tracy's around there too, Tracy back there has some cards. If folks in the audience have questions, you can jot a question down on a card and then we'll take it up here. But yeah, that was something big in my family as well. I heard you lost a sibling. I lost a brother too, so I'm sorry about your loss. And I think in that way, just feeling the gathering, looking forward to this, knowing that we were coming together in celebration and grief, and just thinking about like the Gullah Geechee traditions. What are some of the daily practices and rituals that we saw in the dance that maybe you want to highlight in terms of like them being like a big part of the inspiration of this piece?
The film started with the actual ring shout, and I had gone back and forth, like which part of the film should the shout be in? Originally I was thinking the end, but then it felt right to kind of set the stage with the actual shout. We had learned about some of the shout traditions, and what really stood out to me was that over time, the Judeo-Christian influence really started to take over the songs, the way people dressed, the aesthetic look, whether it was standing more straight up or less of a hinge than there used to be, and then bring back the Afrofuturistic themes, like how can we kind of connect back to the original roots of the shouts? So that was kind of on my mind throughout the whole process, and then what leads you to having these shouts, and what can we kind of connect back to the original meaning of the shouts?
Yeah, so for myself, like if I'm talking personally, it's kind of funny how the traditions, went from traditional, mostly like Nigerian culture, like in the Yoruba influence and things like this, that had a lot to do with the traditions of like Golagichi and the ring shouts and things like this, and then it crossed over into, like she said, Judeo-Christian, influence. And then, I kind of was looking at that in relationship to my life, and I actually went the opposite way. I went from being raised Catholic, Christian, and then, later found out about like where my ancestry, comes from and how they practiced and so on and so forth, about how certain traditions were mostly put on us as a means to control us and things like this, and how we can revert back to actually going in and honoring and recultivating the culture behind, where our people come from and what we represent and how we celebrate, how we worship, even how we see deity, how we see the earth, how we see each other. And so, like, that dynamic for me, that was my life dynamic, was how I grew up, coming from Catholic, upbringing, and then shifting more into becoming more in touch with my ancestry and what that meant going further for me. So, like, that connection was made for me because of a lot of the traditions that they held in those circles and in those mental practices early on, and my mentor, Junius Brickhouse, was someone that we consulted during this time, who's done a lot of research, and more specifically, even that cosmogram that you saw, he introduced that to us, and a lot of that dealt with traditional West African traditions and what the circle means and how the circle moves and what the significance of those movements are and things like that. And a lot of that is what I have spent, the past 10 or so years trying to really dive into and rediscover, where I come from, in ancestry, and where, what my folks, grew up recognizing and understanding. So, yeah.
Does that cover the question?
I have, like, in addition to the question, maybe you want to jump in on this one.
Okay.
Thinking about water, right? That element of water, and that was a question from the audience. Can you talk a little bit more about the significance?
Yeah, there was a lot of water sounds. We had the flowers going in the water. Then, I think there was a lot of, water has meaning in a lot of different cultures and spiritual practices, and like shows up as a symbol and also as like a entity too, related to like different like deities, whether it's Yemaya, which you heard some in the music, singing for Yemaya, but then also Oshun is more freshwater, and so, we use it in multiple ways to reference the names with the flowers that we were tossing into the water, as water like takes things and recycles them, into the world and through the whole, like rainfall back in the whole ecosystem is just recycling. And there's a really beautiful quote from Miss Dottie Lopez that the water is God's hands, and she was just talking about how it's a very peaceful place, and when you see it, you just see source and connection to things. And so I think the sound of the water is just a nice, like, bringing that peace and bringing that connection to all the things. And this, who we carry, we talked a lot about not just ancestry, but just generations in general in both directions. And we talked about, we had a lot of prompts that Olinka brought to choreograph around, and some of them had to deal with like generational trauma and healing, and how do we be vulnerable, and how do we care for generations both past and future. And so there's a lot of like this cyclical nature of just being human in this experience. And so water is always recycling, and that goes with life and death, and yeah, all those things.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Well done. I'm curious too, I don't know if this, I'm trying to make a connection with water and what you said, and how you're mentioning ancestors and generations, right? And I'm curious about, in the description of the film, you speak to grief being an opportunity to reclaim power. So I'm just curious about what that means for any of you. And Elijah, I'm thinking of you as well, just, also in the work that you're doing in community when it comes to gun violence, and, what is that connection to the process of grief in its relationship to power?
I know, or should I say I feel strongly, that a lot of the gun violence that we see, especially in the young people, is part of it is a result of untreated trauma. I don't know how I feel to see my friends get their brains blown out, or hear about a loved one being shot down. I imagine I would want to get some revenge, or just not being able to deal with those feelings, or have it treated professionally. Now that's just the contemporary stuff. We're talking about the intergenerational trauma that's affecting and impacting this behavior as well. So I think that has to be part, I think, of the solution, or at least the treatment, is to really start to provide conversation and tools of healing for these young folks from avenues that we have not thought about yet. How about that?
Thank you. Yeah.
I think furthermore too though, like the word grief is misconstrued, Like people think of the word grief and you think sad and somber. You think, you have to be in this state of melancholy. You have to really it's that overall mentality or concept of state of being is what people also are often depict grief as, when actually grief is more so about pause and reflection in order for you to better understand what it is you're grieving, and so it's not about somber, it's not about depression, that's not what grief is, and the word being, the word being depicted in that way in popular culture and everyday life, then that's what we're kind of told to think, is that we have to, put ourselves in these negative states of mind, in order to properly grieve, when that's not the case. The case is actually that you're supposed to pause and reflect, stop moving so fast forward in order to give yourself time to understand what it is that, just took place, and what you need to do from there, and how you need to, restructure yourself, find your support system, et cetera, whatever you need to do in that moment. That's what grief is, rather than sitting somewhere and being sad all day. You know what I'm saying? That's just what, that's part of a wider state of mentality that keeps us, locked in, to ourselves without actually, branching out of, these states of being in order to really progress, as a people, not just individually, but together. When we understand that notion amongst each other as a community, then we grow stronger. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else want to add to that? Yeah, I was just thinking lately about how, the grief that I've experienced, like whether that's the loss of a family member this year, or even thinking like the last time I was in this space, I've had so many dreams about like dance parties from like 2 years ago, right? So grieving that too, but it's been making me think a lot about, the depth of my love, right? And that's why the grief is hard, because I love hard, right? So just in thinking about, just one step further, and then I'm going to kind of ask some questions about the filmmaking itself. Just thinking about the transformation, right, that can take place for you all as participants through the process of making. So I'm just curious, like, how was that for you to, as a team, come together to create this? Was there a transformation or something that you've noticed through the process of making? You've had a lot of making and growing and transformation. Yeah.
This was a wild one. This one's a wild one too. It's a wiggling worm on my lap. Man, every week that we're in the studio was literally a countdown for me. I've never experienced a creative process where I had such a rush going on. And such a wiggly worm here. I was just getting, bigger and heavier every week. I was like, oh my God, I gotta get this done. But I had to rely on other people around me more to kind of pick up where I couldn't continue. And at the point, we had our second film shoot and somebody decided to come 3 weeks early. And there was no backup plan for me. The team just had to pick up and keep going, and I'm so appreciative and thankful for all of you continuing without me being there and allowed me to just be home and be with my newborn. So that was kind of, I can relax and know that you all were carrying on for me and gonna do an amazing job, and you did.
Can I ask a few questions about the making process? So just, this is a question from the audience, just curious about the direction, just thinking of the choreography piece as one piece, the filmmaking piece as sort of another. How is that conversation back and forth? And I'm thinking also of setting. So we were, in the studio, in the theater, and then also outdoors at Mudbone. So I'm just curious, like, around, like, that negotiation.
Well, Olayinka, sorry. When Olayinka reached out to me originally, I think I thought it was like a music. I didn't know what it was until I got both feet in and we started going through it and talking more. But most of the choreography, all that was really did. I think for me, working with the woman, her name escapes me, from Playhouse.
Kira.
Yeah, she was really instrumental in working with us and me specifically to set the tone with the lighting and ask questions. Is this working? Is this, so it was a fluid group, I think, contribution to what came out. I think I helped in the sense of maybe helping folks to keep focused, like, okay, I need this facial expression, I need to deliver happy, or just the little nuances that, and I think theater people think of that stuff, but since I edit video, I kind of shoot to edit, so those are the little things I think I contributed, and just, but I can't, maybe you guys can help me.
Little things. I thought it was pretty amazing to see the way you and Tira kind of worked together, because you knew what was coming out on film, but she had she was able to complement and like bring things to life in a different way. So, and I'm so used to like theater shows and live performances. So it's kind of like a stepping back and letting go. So that was really great to watch, how the work had this many layers and complexities to it.
Was it different for you to like work on, I mean, you've done a film before, like, is there a big difference between like, for you to do live audience versus film?
Oh, it's so different.
Yeah.
So incredibly different. I'll let you guys speak to the difference.
Yeah, so much. I feel like one of the hardest parts of doing film is it takes so many more people with different skills. I mean, we always have the lighting tech director, like Tira has done lighting stuff for us before. But then to have someone also who's on the camera, has camera skills, has the editing skills, maybe they're the same person, maybe they're not, depending on the project, to have like the music, have the, you know, with film you have the potential to change sets and props and so many things, and change costumes, which you can't always do live, so it's like, just trying to envision all that ahead of time, and imagine the final product, and figuring out the way, like you were saying, Elijah, how you came in, you didn't really know exactly what it was till you got all the way in. That's, I think, the hardest part, is to communicate the vision that maybe the choreographers have to everyone else that has the other skills that need to make it a reality to get everyone on the same page. I think that's so hard. But it really worked. Yeah.
I have kind of a fun question, maybe. Were there any on-set bloopers?
Yeah, me almost killing Elijah's camera when he was trying to get me to jump over it 1,000 times. I think that was it, really. I don't know. Was there any bloopers?
Maybe how many times Malik was in the shot. He that was more so in the post-production. That was more so in the post-production process. I think, you know, we usually have wings as dancers to enter and exit. So it was pretty funny how often Malik was in the wing, but also in the film when he wasn't, or on screen when he wasn't dancing. So that was.
Yeah, you know, thinking back now, I learned so much about doing a project like this, so if I was to do it again, I would be way ahead of the game. You know, for instance, you know, covering the audience section so it's all black, making sure the people who aren't on camera are out of the whole room, those things, what you were talking about, those little things helped me because I spent hours and hours and hours just keyframing black spots to get in the last piece especially. It was like exit signs and I mean stuff that you can't notice means I did a good job, but it was a tedious process, but it was a learning experience to where the next time my game is going to be way up more because of this experience. So I was kind of learning a lot on the fly, but in the editing process, you know, we had to do what we had to do. But it was great. It was easy for me because what I was seeing was beautiful, and it gave me ideas on the set. Like for instance, jumping over the camera, like, dude, that turn you're doing, let me get it from underneath. And he said, man, you sure you want me to jump over your camera? I'm like, yeah, man, just don't fall on it. But but what you guys haven't seen is yet. I'm gonna have to tell you this is I have a lot of screenshots that I took of just like since we're shooting 4K, when you take a screenshot, it's like a photograph, really high resolution, really cool looking stuff, man. So that's on its way.
Well, just thinking too of, y'all are all doing work too, in addition to putting all of this together. So I'm just curious, like, I know you're working with students, high school students. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing this year?
Yeah, I teach at Jefferson, Middle College, Jefferson High School. I was at Harriet Tubman and Fabian Middle School building dance programs to be the feeder schools for Jefferson High School. So students in the neighborhood of Jefferson are working their way up through the dance program. So I'm actually seeing some kids that are freshmen now that I've had since they were sixth graders, which is pretty wonderful. And starting to see them flood the dance classes, which is great.
That's amazing.
I also teach in schools, just not at one spot year round. I teach by residency through Young Audiences and Right Brain Initiative. But also I am, part of my other full-time work is as a DJ and a producer, and I play music. I play every week at a spot at a bar called Church, but I also play gigs random here, there, and things like this. And I produce music. I produce house music, mostly dance music, and it's been going
When's the
pretty
next party coming up that you want to tell us about?
tonight. Tonight, that's where I'm going as soon as we're done. So if you want to come and dance, then I'll be playing music there till 2 a.m. But that's every Sunday. But at church, yeah. But and we go to church. We have a good time. And anyways, yeah, dance and producing music is the other side of this for me. Or rather, DJing and producing music is the other side of this for me. I teach where I teach, get my jobs, but, like the other part of it is, it's become a full-time thing over the past few years, and I'm grateful to have both of my passions all culminated into one thing.
Similarly, do a lot of teaching, though, since the pandemic started, kind of stopped doing a lot of teaching and made a big transition, and coming towards the other side of that now, I'm doing more like actually like digital product design stuff, and still in that transition, but doing work, and that's fun. But I play a lot of music more outside of a Joy, so put a big show last night on called Circo Tropical. That was fun with Central South American party with circus performers. I keep looking over here because she was one of the performers on trapeze. And a Peruvian band, a Brazilian band, so yeah, doing a lot of music and.
Oh boy, so much. There are a number of films that I'm working on at the same time. Mostly documentaries. There's a screening coming up, I believe, at the Hollywood, if everything goes good, which is a work for hire I did for Albina Music Trust. And they're re-releasing an album by the Gangsters. The Gangsters was a 1970s funk band in Portland. And, like Calvin Walker, Their Memory, just super heavyweights. And they recorded this album back in 1970, and it never got released. And they found the recordings, and through the Albina Trust and, some other support from Oregon Community Foundation and RAC, they were able to master and release it. And so I did a promo for that, basically a mini documentary about, I had all these I've been interviewing Thera for months right up until he passed, and I went and interviewed Calvin Walker and just got access to archival footage from the city and from the library and from all this stuff, and Vortex, which is a part of their story as well. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Vortex. Yeah, so anyway, so that's going to be screening, and I can't run down all the list of stuff I'm doing. I will say that I am adapting one of my screenplays to a novel, and I'm on my second draft, and I'll stop there.
That's awesome. Well, Elijah, I just thank you so much for sharing too. And I just want to say that, you said, I think this was a couple of years ago in a conversation, you said with a couple folks around, like, it's important for us to stick together in Portland. It's important for us to stay in Portland, and it's important for this culture to grow, right? So I'm just looking at this right now, and I'm like, everybody here has been in the classroom. Everybody here is like doing a million things. So as a parent, and as a community member and a fellow teacher, I just want to thank you all so much for all the love you pour into our community.
Yeah, teacher. Full circle.
And with that, I think we're going to close out with a little bit of music. Yes, unless there are any other questions. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Everyone, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, and about half of the music you heard and are hearing tonight was made by me. Just to throw that out there.